when you wake up, everyone wakes up. And we back. Aye! That's what I see friends text lately. Aye. Don't know where that came from. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. Aye, aye. But I do know we back. We back with another insane daily reflection today. Let's hype this one up. And this one can withstand the hype. It's going to be just knock your headphones off. Badass. You should never build something up like this, because you're only going to let people down unless you know what's about to happen. As we say in this podcast often, wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. And this reflection today, this is just, it's one of my favorites throughout the years. A little story that is not widely known, but certainly it's indicative of the progression of thoughts on the topic of the development of ourselves. And it starts with a pyramid, a hierarchy of needs that many know. And many have probably heard about this hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, from all of the realms that talk about this hierarchy of needs. It's a lot of marketing departments that talk about it the most. The hierarchy of needs comes from a paper from the famed psychologist Abraham Maslow. Now, he was 35 when he wrote this paper, and it became widely popular really fast because it was this outline of foundational needs all the way up to our subtler but paramount needs for human behavior, for humanity as a whole, but also the individual needing physiological needs met, shelter, clothing, things like that. Then you need belonging and love, and you go up the pyramid, and the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. There's 5 levels to the pyramid, and this hierarchy of needs leading up to self-actualization as the pinnacle of human needs. Once those other foundational needs are met, this became, like I said, widely popular in a great articulation of this hierarchy and progression of human needs. It is talked about, we talked about it at Airbnb, within the marketing department at Airbnb, often. It was just brought up. It's made its way into pop culture in all kinds of different ways. There are many books on modern adaptations to this concept of the hierarchy of needs, which was popularized about 80 years ago. Like I said, Maslow was about 35 when he wrote this, and it got concretized in popular culture of these are the levels of human need. The less widely known version about the hierarchy of needs, the story of the hierarchy of needs, is that it doesn't end with a pinnacle at self-actualization. You see, later in his life, Maslow refined his pyramid, refined the hierarchy, and said, actually, there's something above self-actualization. And it's called self-transcendence. It was about the last 10 years of his life that he started to tell everyone, hey, I got it wrong. The pinnacle of human needs is not your own actualization, becoming who you are made to be. It's actually transcending who you are made to be, thoughts of your own needs, transcending them and using all of these foundational layers, including your own actualization, to help others meet their needs. Self-transcendence, transcending, satisfying, checking all the boxes, but transcending your own needs to be able to help others. And he called this self-transcendence. The self-transcendence goes so far as to say that you can't just help them with foundational things, but your goal is to also help them actualize and then transcend themselves. This is reminiscent of the Bodhisattva vow. In Buddhism, there is there are two types of Buddhas. There are the Bodhisattvas and the Pratyeka Buddha. The Pratyeka Buddha will become enlightened, go out in the forest, go to a cave, boom, they're done. They're no longer even here. Their body's just carrying out its momentum. But they have awakened and they go off into the sunset, as they say. And this is actually really reminiscent of the Bodhisattvic vow within Buddhism, where the individual says, I'm only going to become enlightened if everyone, the whole world, becomes enlightened. That's more selfless symbolism than it is a prescriptive progression. Just the selflessness built into, I'm only going to achieve that enlightened, awakened state if everyone achieves it. That's beautifully selfless in its own right. That is a core criteria to becoming enlightened. So it's not meant to be, although some traditions will take it quite literally. The Vedantic view is the Bodhisattvic vow. The definition of love is seeing no otherness in the world. The idea of, I'm going to become transcendent. I'm going to ascend to the highest state above all of this suffering. I'm going to just jump in my spiritual escape pod. That can be as selfish and hedonistic of a pursuit as anything else in the material world. But the key to the Bodhisattvic vow, the key to self-transcendence, and the terms that Maslow used, is that at this point, it has nothing to do with your own progression. It is a transcendence of your selfish pursuit, a seeing no otherness between your own pursuit and those pursuits of everyone around you, a dedication and devotion to their enlightenment, as much, if not even more, than your own. Which brings up a really interesting nuance to the pursuit of enlightenment. And to emphasize what was just said, Maslow's view on self-transcendence was that the highest need we have is to help others satisfy all needs that they have. And the highest need that's dormant, latent, that is deep, but ever present within us, is to transcend ourselves. Our deepest and our highest need is to transcend our selfish pursuits. It's not a desire. It's not qualitatively saying, here's a richer pursuit. It's a need, according to Maslow. A need. And the nuances within this, you'd spend a lifetime thinking about, because it's quite paradoxical. One, this is saying this is a need. It's not a beneficial bonus. It's not icing on the cake. It is an absolute need, latent within us. We need to transcend our selfish pursuits, and we will not be satisfied until we do. Very Vedantic. As Swami will say, you're like a 4-foot spring that's been pushed down to 1 foot. You will not rest. You will not rest content until you get back to your natural state, which is ever full, which is paripurna. That means ever full or ever complete, awakened, enlightened, realizing, manifesting the divine that is already within. All of these things point to the same thing. Second interesting nuance, beyond just it being a need and not just a nice to have, is that you won't rest until everyone experiences it. That seems paradoxical because you won't have it unless everyone else has it. But as Abraham Lincoln famously said, really the only way to lead is by example. Leading by example is not the primary means of influence. It's the only means of influence. So you won't reach it until others reach it. They won't reach it if you are trying to guide them there until you reach it. But one thing is very clear. It can't just be a selfish pursuit. can't just be, like I said, the spiritual escape pod to get out of the suffering. You might be, from the outside looking in, it looks like you're in this spiritual escape pod. You are cruising at beautifully high altitudes of peace. But internally, that's from the external perspective, people watching you and your development. But internally, by definition, you're seeing no otherness in the world around you. You are doing it in service of those around you. The practical example, specific example here in my own life, is that for years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, the pursuit was my own personal enlightenment. I thought, well, that's what every text is pointing to. That is the natural state. This spring won't feel content until it's back in its natural state. But it was me just trying to find the intellectual, maybe time-tested, but certainly the intellectual shortcut to peace, prosperity, to bliss. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, quite hedonistic. The flips started to happen when I began thinking about it in terms of genuinely wanting that state for my 3 little daughters and my wife, more so than wanting it for me. I'm so far from having a unselfish or selfless pursuit within this spiritual path. And I'll do an episode sometime soon of the distinction between unselfish and selfless, because those are 2 different things. But I'm so far from an unselfish, much less a selfless pursuit within the spiritual path. But it was this flip where it was more important for them to see my own development for their development than it was for me trying to scale some mountain because I thought peace, Zen, enlightenment would be up there. I'm still working on that path, moving towards needing to help others transcend their selfish pursuits more than a feeling of need to transcend my own. And like I said, it is paradoxical. It is so subtle. There's such nuance there. But I will say directionally, this spiritual path, it's like it went from 1-dimensional to 3-dimensional. When it started to take on this quality of needing others, of feeling a deep need for others to not only be on the path, others that I care so deeply for. True need, and understanding that that which is forced is not forceful. So, an understanding I can't force them on this path, but a feeling of deep need that it goes beyond my own path, my own pursuit, my own transcendence. The last thing that I will say on this, in this 3-dimensional aspect where it's more than just one person's individual solitary path. The last thing I'll say on this topic, and this is referenced in one of the episodes on the podcast. Swami has a great line on this. Vedanta just has a great line on this. There's only you. So if you want to add in a third layer of paradox and like trippiness from selfish pursuit of escape pod towards bliss, towards rational bliss, okay, this all makes sense to me. That's where I should direct my life. Then this transcendence and spill over into no. Bodhisattvic vow style, like no. This is much more about those that I care about reaching it than me trying to just get to the mountaintop. And as they say, the only Zen you find on mountaintops is the Zen you bring up there with you. There is no selfish pursuit beeline to get there. It has to be in communion with the community that you start to identify with the same way you'd identify with your right hand, your mind, your intellect. So there's the communal aspect, but then there's this third trippy layer. Love, as is defined in Vedanta, is seeing no otherness in the world. And Swami will say this in the ashram quite often, there is only you. In the dream example, that is the illusion of the dream, is that there is a subject and an object, an individual and its environment, you and the 6 other people you're dreaming about, the walls, the floor, the shoes, the clothes, the drama that you don't know what's about to happen, and yet you're projecting it all, creating it all. Your world creating the entire experience. You think there are other people, and yet it's just you. So paradoxically, there's this continuation to where then it goes back to you and your pursuit from 2 different levels. 1, an identification of those around you. And 2, the evaporation of the illusion that there is a separateness, a plurality in the midst of what this philosophy says. Unity. There's only you. Which brings us back to this logistical progression of when you wake up, everyone wakes up. But how to wake up is to have the intention. The intention, the mind, the intellect, the intention for everyone to wake up. The dedication, the devotion, the aim, and the execution for everyone to wake up. And then you do. And if that didn't tie your mind and your intellect into knots, kudos for following that. But if it did, maybe listen to the episode again. That's today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.